I attended the Summit of Greatness this year with Lewis Howes, and let me just say this, it will not be my last. Now, this for me was something that I've been wanting to attend since 2016, since the year that it started. And it kind of just didn't ever align and make sense. Those first few years, I was driving Uber full time, and for whatever reason, I created an excuse in my mind that it didn't make sense to attend and go, even though it was very reasonable in price. Part of that reason for me coming up with excuses to not go was it originally was hosted out of Columbus, Ohio, which is where Lewis is from. And ultimately, I just never found like it was the right time. Then over the years, when I started kind of switching up and financially being in a better spot in my life, going from Uber to then working at Liquid IV full time, still just the way the timing aligned, it never made sense. And I remember 2 years ago, I almost pulled the trigger and went, but something came in the way, couldn't do it. Then last year I wanted to do it. We moved to Austin 2 weeks before, and it just didn't align. And I trusted that when the time is meant to be, it will happen. Early this year, he announced that it would be in Los Angeles, or I came across that it was going to be in Los Angeles, and something kind of struck a chord in me that this was the year for me to go. I could time it to go back to Los Angeles and see friends that I hadn't seen in a long time, and long time since I had quote unquote moved, I guess, right, out of the city. And I just went to Kate, my fiance, and was like, I want to go to the summit this year. Is this something you'd want to do? And she was open-minded to going. So we got our tickets locked in, and we were on the schedule to go. And this was February of this year that I committed to going. So we had about 6 to 7 months. And the timing couldn't have been better because we ultimately made this a trip, not only for the Summit of Greatness, but also for our engagement photos. We did a shootout in LA, the bar that we originally met. And then we also had Kate's bridal shower out there as well. So it was a jam-packed weekend, but ultimately the summit is what originally inspired us to go out there. Now, before I get into the experience, let me give some context to why Lewis Howes is credited for me as the single person that led me to where I am today. And I have so much joy even just saying his name out loud. And I've had, when I'm about to record, I've had this conversation multiple times in the last 2 weeks since I went to the summit. And I cannot stop sharing the takeaways, the lessons, the in-between moments, the things that I'm realizing and learning. And I'm probably going to learn something even just through recording this podcast today. But so much gratitude for this experience. So I discovered Lewis Howes in the fall of 2015. It's how I came across the School of Greatness podcast. And that podcast is what allowed me to start opening my mind to self-improvement, self-discovery, trying to find my passion and purpose by just sitting in the room and listening to these conversations with incredibly intelligent, smart, inspiring, successful people. His podcast completely transformed the direction I was going to go with my life. And ultimately, it gave me permission to start my first podcast in 2016 when I graduated college, right? I was listening to his podcast, and I was really looking for a show that was more focused on people in their 20s, right? I was listening to so many different people late in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s of their skills and their stories, but it just didn't resonate for me as much as I know it would if I was listening to someone in their early 20s, because I was 22, graduating college, didn't know what I wanted to do. And ultimately, it inspired me to start my first podcast, which was called Purpose in the Youth. And it was focused on unfolding the stories of passionate people. I went on to do that podcast for 3.5 years. I drove Uber full time while I was funding the podcast. My slogan was podcaster by day, Uber driver by night. And any of the OGs that are listening right now that have been following me since that podcast, just know that I greatly, greatly appreciate you. Now, over the years, I was supporting Lewis's pod and sharing his content out. And, I don't know when it was, but essentially I think he at one point reshared one of my stories, and that I knew opened the DMs, right? Now I could send a message to him and see if he read it, if he ignored it. I could see it because now the DMs were wide open. And what I'm so grateful for is that he ended up and has been a direct and indirect mentor for me over the years, going out of his way to respond to my questions. I remember when I was still driving Uber full time, he carved out the time to go back and forth with me to try to like, okay, how do I get out of driving Uber? What are the next steps? And just over the years, just having that constant flow of conversation with him has been so inspiring and impactful to me. And I just have always appreciated his attention and thoughtfulness in responding me over the years. We ended up recording a podcast on this show, episode 152. That was on December 20th of 2021. That was a massive bucket list item for me. And I'm so grateful to have documented that conversation. What was crazy about it was about a month leading up to that podcast, I ended up running into Lewis Howes in Venice, and I met him and what was his girlfriend at the time, Martha, now fiance. And I just remember running down the beach and seeing him, and just my endorphins are firing because I'm running. And I stop and I'm like, oh my God, this is Lewis Howes. And we connect and we chat for a couple minutes. And just a few weeks later, we did the podcast, which was an incredible conversation. My only regret is not taking him up on the offer to record it at his studio. I had limiting beliefs about going there, and I just did a remote podcast virtually and was really happy with how it came out. But, looking back, wish I would have taken him up on that offer. He also inspired me to run my first marathon. Lewis Howes is the inspiration. I was supposed to run with Team Greatness in 2021 at the LA Marathon, which is going to be my first marathon. And long story short, they ended up backing out of the marathon because they had gotten pushed 6 months out. And I think it maybe interrupted other plans that he and the team had. And I said, you know what, I've already been training for it. I'm going to do it. And I did it. And I ran the LA Marathon. And then I would go on to run 2 more marathons, 3 marathons in 6 months. And once again, this was inspired by Lewis Howes. And funny enough, when I ran into him in Venice, in California, that was the week after I ran the marathon. It was my first day back running. And who do I see? Lewis Howes. I'm saying this out loud, and I'm realizing how all this is interconnected. And it's just so damn beautiful. And I'm feeling the love and gratitude as I'm recording this. The last component that I'll share of how, and I could spend more of this podcast just giving flowers to Lewis Howes. The last piece I'll share before I kind of get into the actual summit is 2018, he comes out with a podcast and starts really publicly sharing about a sexual assault encounter that he had when he was 5 years young. And I remember when I don't remember if it was the podcast or where I first read it or heard it. It's probably one of his podcasts. But I remember hearing that and thinking to myself, I can't wait for the day. One, I'm so proud of him, and I feel so seen by him sharing this, because I can't wait for the day for me to finally have the courage to speak my truth about a sexual assault that that had happened to me when I was a kid. And it took me 6 years to finally publicly share that and speak that, which was my decision. I'm not encouraging and saying everyone needs to publicly share something that intimate, but it was part of my journey being a creator and documenting and recording all these podcasts. And I knew that one day I would want to share it. And so at the top of this year, on episode 227 of this podcast, I opened up on the sexual assault story. And once again, I felt so relieved in doing that. And a small part of a lot of the deep work I did last year leading up to me even sharing connects back to Lewis Howes. So that's setting the frame of why this weekend was so important to me. Going to the summit was so important, because this was the man that really has completely transformed my life. And I've communicated this to him, but I don't even think he realizes to the level that he's impacted my life. So Summit of Greatness was a 2-day event, right? It's in LA. It was Friday, September 13th, and then Saturday, September 14th. This had about 4,500 people at the Shrine Auditorium in downtown LA, right on USC's campus. It's kind of crazy walking into the auditorium, because there was the auditorium, and then they also had the expo center. And the Expo Center is also where they host concerts. And the last time I had been in that building was 2 years ago for a concert for essentially like a DJ. And walking into the venue, I could feel just the transformation of myself in 2 years. I mean, just night and day different human being. And I just felt so alive being there. So we had 4,500 people, and let me tell you, you could feel the energy walking in, checking in. Everyone was on alert, excited, happy to be there. And even as we walked down to our seats, we were very lucky. We were 6 rows back. They had a drummer. They had a hype man going. I mean, this place was alive. It was like 9 a.m. start time, and this place was just absolutely firing on all energy. And it just felt incredible. Now, Lewis House is the first one to come out, right? They have this huge hype build up to him coming out. They play California Love by Tupac, which is a huge record that I played thousands of times, so many times before I moved to LA. So many times when I was living in LA, it's a testament to LA, the city that I had always wanted to live and was able to live for 6 years of my life. And having him come out to that and seeing him, I just was filled with so much joy and gratitude. And I literally I had tears coming down my eyes, but I literally just wanted to just break down, because not only was I seeing him step into his greatness and seeing this moment as this is the product of 10 plus years in the making, but then also reflecting on who was I when I first discovered Lewis House versus who I am now. And I was just filled with joy. So every moment that he was speaking, I was just grateful to just be able to see and watch him in his greatness. And it was incredible. We had speakers across the 2 days. We had Dr. Joe Dispenza, which was phenomenal. I'm actually reading his book right now called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. I am absolutely going down the Joe Dispenza rabbit hole right now because I was really inspired by his talk. I listened to many of his podcasts over the last couple of years, but what I loved about him was when he walked down, he was the first speaker of the first day, and place erupts for him. But what I loved was when he said, "This is the healing energy," because the place was going crazy. And when everyone kind of calmed down a little bit so he could finally speak, and it was like a podcast out between him and Lewis, he's like, "This is the healing energy. If you can keep this energy outside of this building, this is the energy that heals." And it just struck a chord because it was so true. You could just feel it in the room. He was incredible. We also had David Goggins, which he was the last speaker of the last day. Absolutely electric. I thought it was coincidental that when he was speaking, that he talked about how he was someone that always takes multiple attempts to accomplish the goal. He wasn't the person that, gets it the first round, the second round, the third. He's like the 14th, the 15th, the 16th guy. And it was so important for me to hear that because just 3 days before him saying that, I had failed the 75 hard challenge for my second attempt. And I'm beating myself up like, dude, this is your second attempt and you still can't get it done. And hearing him, it was like, it doesn't matter how many attempts it's going to take me with 75 hard, I'm going to get the job done. And that's what he kind of said was he just never stops. He never stops until the job is done. And it really resonated. We also had Ezra Perel, Cody Sanchez, and a few other amazing speakers. I could individually recap each of the speakers, but that would take this podcast would be probably 5x the length. Performance-wise, we had a woman named Rachel Clayton, incredibly talented. There was these 2 men acrobat guys called the Lads. They were great. InQ, poetic guy, and then Harry Mack, who was this freestyler. All of the performance, all of the speakers, everything was intentional. Everything was so valuable, and it was just so well executed. The day itself, both days were broken up the exact same, right? So start of the day was 9 a.m. till about noon. You were at your seat. There were speakers. There were, maybe some questions that you were asking to the people you were with or you were sitting by. And then at noon, they would break. Then from noon till 2:30, it was essentially a break where there were food trucks outside. There was also a lunch and learn for 1 hour in each of the days. And then this was really the time to kind of mingle and connect with the people that were there as well. Then we would come back in, and then from 2:30 till 5, more speakers, more performers, wrap up at 5. And then there was another hour or so where you can mingle with people out in the expo area where there was all of the speakers' books and greatness, merch, food, drinks, everything you can imagine. So that was kind of the structure of how both of the days went. So looking back, I've had at this point about 10 days to reflect on the Summit of Greatness experience. And there's 6 takeaways that kind of come to my mind when I look back on the last 10 days of sitting and feeling into these emotions. And there's probably more that will continue to come up, but there's 6 that I wanted to share with all of you today. Number 1 is greatness is defined by your actions. Watching Lewis in his greatness, I kept reminding myself that this is not luck. This has been something that he has been working towards for damn near over a decade. He deserves this. Having 4,500 people in the room for him, or at least coming through his invite, and he's the one that, started the summit. It's remarkable. I mean, just you had people flying in from countries all over the world. It was, I'm all about time and attention and intention, right? Like to get people to buy a ticket, book a flight, travel, carve out time from their lives, hotel rooms, food, Ubers. This is not something to be taken for granted. I mean, we're talking at least $1,000 per person invested to be there. And watching him in his greatness, watching him just flow, and even when there were hiccups, he kind of laughed it off and just kept rolling with it. It was inspiring, to say the least. And I was taking so many notes of just watching and observing. And he deserves every bit of success that he has and will continue to get because he's worked relentlessly for it. Number 2 is your environment creates your reality. Being surrounded by 4,500 people with the same intention of wanting to become better versions of themselves was contagious and powerful. On top of that, you had all the speakers that were there to just give. You had all of Team Greatness and the people that were, I think, volunteering and facilitating and instructing were there to help. And you could feel their energy. You could feel their presence, giving you high fives when you're walking in. I mean, it was just, you felt like you were in a different world because everyone there was open-minded. Everyone there was encouraging and wanting to get to know each other. And it really is so important on the environment you surround yourself with. Like, I've always been a big believer, and I'm sure you've heard this quote millions of times, that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Look at the 5 people you spend the most time with, and the intentions, the goals, the interests, that's where your life is going to go unless you break out of it. And I think the environment plays such a factor as well. So it's not only the people you surround yourself with, but the environment itself. And being around those people, it was just so clear that this was just a room full of people on a very similar mission to become the best versions of themselves. Number 3, your story is your power. So one of the speakers there, his name is Rory Vaden, I think, V-A-D-E-N. I might have mispronounced that. Him and Lewis have been friends for a long time, and he had a great presentation. He has a business called Brand Builders where he helps support people trying to build their personal brand. And he had a quote that has been ringing in my mind every day since the summit. And you may have seen me post on social media, but it said, "You are most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were." That struck a chord within me because everything that I do present day is truly from a place of wanting to serve the younger version of myself. All of my business, like my coaching program, the men's retreat, the things that I'm hosting here in Austin, the men's meetups, the coffee and cold plunge, all of this is really coming from a place of serving the younger version of myself, which really is serving other people that may be in a spot similar to where I previously was. Not that I'm better than them, not that I'm an expert, not that I'm cooler than them, but I'm trying to serve those that are in the position I once was. And that really just validated that I'm on the right path. I believe it, I feel it, I see it, but there are those little speed bumps along the way where you second guess yourself. And hearing and seeing that quote just validated. And I think for those listening, my encouragement would be, how are your downfalls, those tough moments, how can that become your power, right? I've heard from my partner's best friend, she said this, and I've been hearing it more in podcasts, but your mess becomes your message. How can you take all of the stuff that you wish never happened and actually lean into that and feel it and accept it, move through it, and let that be your power? Number 4, give more than you take. So clear. This is another thing that has been ringing true in my mind, which is since the summit, how can I be of more service to others? Mind you, this Summit of Greatness is ran and created by Lewis Howes, and he promotes all the people that he's bringing up on stage that are going to be there performing, etc. But the entire 2-day weekend was all about serving others, serving the guests, serving the performers, serving the audience members, going out there asking them questions. It was all from a place of service, and it was just like it was unbelievable to watch it unfold. Yes, he gave like a 15, 20 minute, I wouldn't really call it a keynote in the beginning. It was kind of just setting the stage for the weekend and where he is. And he shared some, his next book with us and how he's training for the Olympics for 2028 in LA. But it was, the whole weekend was serving others. And for me, I think I do a good job of serving others, but I think there are still areas where I can give more. And I've been challenging myself, give more. How can I be of service to at least one person per day? And how can I just be there and support them and give to them? So I've been challenging myself a lot with that lately. Number 5, give yourself grace. Treat yourself with kindness and understanding, right? Acknowledging that it's okay to be imperfect. So we flew back from the Summit of Greatness on a Sunday. And then that Monday, I got right back into my rhythm, right? Mind you, we were in LA for 5 days. I didn't work. I didn't really check emails. I wasn't doing anything really when it comes to working on my laptop. I do believe my life is the work. The coffee meetups, the runs, the dinners, the connecting with people, that's part of the work. But when it comes to sitting down in front of the laptop, I didn't do any of it. More times than not, opening up that laptop on Monday, I would feel a little anxious and overwhelmed because I got to catch up on all these emails. I got to get back the momentum. And yeah, it would be easy for me to just kind of tense up. And I found myself that Monday and every day after since, and even reminding myself today, to give myself more grace, to not feel all this pressure. Watching Lewis reminded me that it just takes consistency and time, and obviously a lot more things underneath the hood to get to where he is today. But realistically, it's just time. Consistently doing something over a long period of time is what got him to where he is today. I think he's recorded 1,500 plus episodes of the School of Greatness. And keeping that in my mind, knowing like this is going to take time. I've been on this journey for 7-8 years. I continue to show up on a daily, weekly basis. But for me, it's like I need to give myself more grace. And sometimes my expectations are a little bit too high on a daily basis, or I just create an unhealthy amount of pressure within me for the day that it doesn't really feel sustainable over the long term. And I have been feeling it more so going into that weekend. And that to me was like an indicator of like, you need to give yourself more grace when you get back. And so since then, I've been much more being realistic about what can I accomplish in a day, maybe shifting things to the next day, and obviously still being extremely intentional in trying to move the ball down the field every day. It's not like I'm, only working 2 to 3 hours and calling it a day. Like I am putting in the effort and work, but just recognizing like sometimes things have to adjust and you can't get to something. That's okay. Move it to tomorrow. Don't beat yourself up. So I've been giving myself a lot more grace since observing and watching Lewis and his greatness. And 6, be the one to break the ice with a stranger. It amazed me so the first day Kate was with me, so I had someone to go with. And then the second day I went by myself because that was the day of her bridal shower. More so on the second day, it amazed me how even during the lunch, I got my food, I walk out and there's a sea of people, 500, maybe 1,000 people sitting, standing, doing whatever. And I'm an extrovert at heart. And it took me probably about 10 minutes to find somewhere to sit. Felt really overwhelmed. I just felt like there was too many people to consider to like sit down with. And I'm like, what table do I sit down with? If I sit there, are they going to be okay with it? If I go over there and chat with them, are they going to be okay with it? Am I judging people by their external and trying to like understand who they are before you even sit down? And all this was just running in my mind. And eventually I did a full lap around, saw the table that I looked at from the beginning, and I just sat down and I had a great conversation with this gentleman named Cody and his wife, Ashley. And it was great. It was a great conversation, chatted with a few other people at the table, and then went and sat back down. But in that moment and after it, I reflected like, where was all this anxiety coming from? You knew you were in a safe, trusted environment with people that were very like-minded, that, enjoyed the school of greatness. And there was just something within me, which is unknown, which is okay, that I felt overwhelmed in that moment. And so I had to allow myself to feel it and then to just break the ice with the stranger, sit down. And once the ice was broken, once I initiated that first question, it was all good. I felt comfortable. I felt okay to sit there. But it was really, really surprising to me because normally I don't feel that type of anxiousness when meeting new people. And it would have been a different environment if I was walking into a room of 20 people versus 500. So it was just another reminder to me that, 1, it's okay to feel those emotions, and 2, just break the ice, Bobby. Just break that ice. So with all that in mind, I think it's pretty obvious and clear that I had an incredible experience. I would encourage anyone out there that is a listener of the School of Greatness podcast, if you like that podcast at all, really consider the summit. I will be carving out time to be there every year from here on out, as long as there's nothing that absolutely takes up my schedule. And that's really on me to just put it in my calendar and not miss it. But I will continue to carve out time to be there because not only do I value and appreciate Lewis House so much, but I really do value and appreciate his community. I ended up meeting 2 people there that I connected with, and one is based in Austin, one is based in Nashville, that I will continue to see where those friendships go. But I'm filled with gratitude for Lewis Howes and the community he's built, the greatness team that supports him and allows him to operate at his highest level. And I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. The last thing I will say is, with regards to the Summit of Greatness, is this was the first time for me ever going to one of these conferences. I've always been someone that is so much more behind the scenes, like listening to the podcast or creating my own content and putting it out there to the world. I have not really carved out the time, energy, or money to go to these conferences, and it completely transformed just what I knew to be true, which is something I've been doing these last few months, which is carving out time to create experiential containers, like hosting men's dinners here in Austin. Me and 2 buddies started hosting a coffee cold plunge monthly men's meetup here in Austin. I'm hosting my first men's retreat. Like, there's value in these experiences. And yes, it is important to do some of the solo work, listen to the podcast, read the books, do the journaling. But there's just something magical about being in the room. Like, even if I watched all of these speakers and all this content after it happened, I would still learn from it, but it would not be the same as being in the room. There's an energy, there's a magic to it. And that to me was just a very clear reminder that I need to keep carving out time for being in these rooms, because that magic and that feeling, that emotion is just truly, truly priceless. So with that in mind, I have 2 offers for this community. One is my Lost to Limitless one-on-one coaching program. I have 5 spots available. This is for someone that is just lacking clarity, that wants direction in their life, tired of feeling overwhelmed, not having every aspect of your life in alignment, so you're kind of burnt out, you have imbalance. If that sounds like you at all and you want to help create clarity and have direction, let me step in and help you. I have 5 spots available for the rest of 2024. Head to bobbyhobart.com to learn more about the program or apply. And then the next offer is I am hosting my first ever men's Design Your Life retreat. That is going to be happening November 14th through the 17th. It's going to be 6 guys with me, so 7. We'll have a private chef on staff. We may have a few other facilitators. We're going to work out. We're going to meditate. I'm going to take you all through some incredible workshops to help you design a life full of intention, to help you optimize your life to align with your personal and professional goals. And through that 3-night, 4-day experience, you are going to walk out of it with so much more clarity, less overwhelm, and just excitement for the life you're building for yourself. You're going to feel like you have the tools and direction, and now community of guys behind you supporting you. So if that is of interest, we have 5 spots left of the 6. You can head to bobbyhobart.com, look under programs, look under men's retreat to apply, and then I'll set up a call with you to make sure this is the right fit. Thank you for tuning in. I hope this has been a good experience, getting to hear what the Summit of Greatness podcast has been like. If you enjoyed the episode, share it out on your IG story. Tag me at Bob-A, B-O, 3 B's, 4 A's and a Y. Sharing out these episodes helps the show grow, and I really, really do appreciate it. So please do that so that maybe someone in your community can hear this episode, get inspired, take something from it, and it does make a difference. But that's it. I will see you all on the next one. It's the Bearded Man Podcast.